Okay, we're about 3 minutes after the top of the hour, so let's jump in here. Welcome everyone. This is Ashley Tusignot. I am Senior Product Manager for Secure 9000. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We are excited to show you Secure Visitor Management. We're going to take you through a live demo. I'm here today with Jason Troyster. He is our Technical Sales Specialist. Just to run over a couple housekeeping items, this is a recorded session, so we will have the recording available after. It's also in listen-only mode due to being a recording. So if you have questions, please enter them into the question box and we'll leave some time for a Q&A session at the end. And with that, I will pass things over to Jason. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Ashley. So as Ashley stated, my name is Jason Troyster. I'm a technical sales specialist in the Northeast United States. I am a technical resource in the area for the folk up in this region. Today we're going to be just going over the Secure 9000 Enhanced Visitor Management option for you. Just a little bit about myself. I have been working in IT-related industry for about 30 years now. For the past 15 years, I've been working specifically in the security region. And the last 3 or so years, I've been with Software House working in this capacity. So we're going to go over, as we said, the Secure 9000 Enhanced Visitor Management System today. We're going to demonstrate the product from the perspective of those who use it. So first, we're going to go through the host role, the visitor role, and then the receptionist. We're going to follow that kind of organically through the process, beginning from the invitation and through the reception of the visitor. Today, we'll be focusing everything that we talk about on those particular interfaces specifically. We're not going to go into the configuration of the product during this webinar. If it is something that you're interested in, we encourage you to talk to your integrator or your Software House sales rep and set up a more complete demonstration of the product all the way through so we can cover those details. With that, I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint deck. Now, don't worry, we don't do a lot of slides in this presentation. There's one thing I want to bring to your attention first, and that is that there are actually 2 different versions of visitor management that are available for Secure 9000. They're both licensed features. You have to request them. There's a license fee involved, depending on what it is you're asking for. We have both basic and enhanced. We're not going to cover basic today. We're only going to cover the enhanced version. And my next slide that I use is the standard Secure 9000 licensing slide that we're all familiar with seeing. In this particular case, we're going to highlight this line right here in the middle, which is your enabled personnel records. And the reason we talk about that is because in Secure 9000 Visitor Management, our visitors are going to be considered personnel records who just aren't here all the time. With that, I'm going to get rid of this slide deck and we'll go right into the product. So the first thing about the Secure 9000 Enhanced Visitor Management is we're going to be doing some things within the product, but we're not going to be operators of Secure 9000. So in order to do that, we're going to use what's called the Secure Web Portal. And this is where we put some of the functionality that you can do in the system without being an operator. So we don't need to have access to that full client or even the web client of Secure 9000. We can do what we need to do right in the portal. We're going to log into the portal using an email address and a password. Now you can associate a person, one of your personnel who is a host in your system with this login by using a association in their personnel record, which relates them to their normal Windows credential. It's perfectly possible to do that. However, if you're in a situation where your hosts are not part of the same Windows domain, you also have the ability to use basic authentication. And in that case, you would put the email address related to them into their personnel record. They could then come to this portal. They could put their email address in the first line and click on register. The system will send them an email. They'll click on the email. It'll take them back and they'll be able to set their password. The process is the same if they forget their password, put in your email address, click forgot password, and you'll get an email to let you set the password for the system. We're going to use Windows authentication today. We're just going to put in our email address and password, and we're going to click sign in. Caroline is our example for who we're logging into the portal as today. She's kind of a high-level person within this fictitious organization, so she has the ability to see multiple things. This screen is going to demonstrate, it's going to show what it is this particular personnel record has the authority to do within the Secure Web portal. We have two functions showing in this particular screen. The two icons on the left are visitor management. That's what we're going to talk about today, but we'll spend a moment and talk about the two icons on the right. That is access management workflow. I'll spend a moment and explain what that is. Access management workflow is the idea that while we are the ones who control access within our organizations, sometimes we're not the ones who are actually responsible for the areas that we control. And the classic example of that is the IT department. You will have an IT department that's under regulatory compliance rules where they have HIPAA compliance or Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, and they need to know who has access to their areas. We always had to handle that in security. Access management workflow gives you the ability to let people ask for access to an area and then offload the function so that the person who is responsible for that area can actually grant it. If you're interested in that particular function of Secure 9000 and you'd like to know more about it, you're in luck, because next month's webinar that we do is going to be on that topic. Today, we're going to focus on visitor management.
Hey, Jason.
Hey.
Sorry, I know I'm going to keep most questions, but somebody just asked real quick if you could just give the rundown of the difference between enhanced and basic visitor management, just because we're going to be focused on enhanced today.
Sure. What I'll do is I'll pop the slide back up and we'll take a look at some of the differences that are listed in my slide.
Okay.
But functionally, the thing to keep in mind is we're going to go over this ability to use a web interface to go in without being an operator, invite a guest to come to the site, and then we're going to send an email out to that visitor. They're going to get that email. They're going to be able to use the information in that email to come in and check in at the site. And then the reception is also going to be able to use this same web interface in order to process that visitor. And none of that functionality is available in the basic version. In the basic version, you're using the normal Secure 9000 client to handle all your visitors and what you can do with them. So in a nutshell, that's the difference. Again, if we'd like to dive into that on a different webinar, maybe we can give some feedback. We'll add that information back in. Or if a specific customer is interested in it, again, we can contact the integrator, or we can contact our area sales manager for Software House, and we can arrange a full demo of that.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right, so we're going to work through the lifespan of a visit. So we're going to start off by inviting a visitor to come to our site. To do that, we're going to use the visitor management icon right here. So we'll click on that. The next thing we have to do is choose where we're going to invite our visitor to come to. Now, Caroline in this example only has one option to choose from. She has Software House HQ. You could have different examples here. You might have more than one visit site. Visit sites could be a physical location, but they could also be different areas within a location. So if we have an office in New York City and we have another one in Chicago, that's a clear definition. We probably want a visit site for each one of those. However, maybe we want to have different visit sites within a location. Maybe in New York City, we have a operations department, a finance department, a C-suite perhaps, and maybe an HR department. And maybe we want to separate who is allowed to invite a visitor to come to that space. We can do that by creating different visit sites and controlling who has access to those visit sites. For this example, we're going to keep things pretty simple. We're just going to go with one. So Caroline's going to click into the site she wants to invite people to. She already has a couple of visits set up in the system, so she can see those. On the left-hand side of the screen, she can see her list of visits that's here. She can sort this if she wants to. She can sort it based on after a date or before a date, and she can use the calendar to change the date that she's looking at. On our right-hand side of the screen, we have our default calendar view. You can see it's at month right now. If there was a lot of information on here, we could limit this down a little bit. We have a week option and also a day option. If you chose to, you can actually just click on the day you're interested. We see we have two more listed on this particular date, so we can click that and get a more detailed view of that. You will see any visit on which you are a host. If we need to create a visit, we're going to use the New Visit button up here on the right. So we're just going to click that. and I'm going to open up my screen and show all the different fields that are available to us. So the first field we have is our site field. We just talked about that a minute ago. And then we have visit template, which I'm going to come back to. We have our start time and our end time. Those are the bookends. It's the start of the visit to the end of the visit. If it's all going to happen on the same day, we're coming in for a 1-hour meeting, no problem. If it's a longer visit than that, you can have it span multiple days. We can bulk add visitors. We can add visitors individually. We can add additional hosts. Why would we do that? Well, possibly we're hosting a meeting that's on site and we have a number of people from the organization who are going to come to it. Maybe we would make them hosts so that they would get the email notifications related to this meeting. It's also possible that Caroline might be an admin assistant for someone, and maybe the person whom she is creating this visit for is not herself. She wants to add them as a host. Perfectly fine. You can have multiple hosts on a visit. Down below in the details area, we have our visit name and description. This is friendly information that goes into the Secure 9000 system to make this visit a little bit easier to identify to those who are looking at the screens. You can populate it or not. If you don't populate the visit name, the system will create one for you. Visitor instructions is information which you're going to share with your visitor in advance of them coming to the site. Anything that you would like them to know about ahead of time when they're coming to your site. If you were, for instance, a manufacturing facility, possibly you would have concerns about necessary PPE for attending that particular location. Maybe they need safety shoes, who knows. You could put that information directly into your visitor instructions and let them know these things that they need to know on arrival. Maybe it's as simple as when you come in, go up to the front desk, and there'll be an iPad that you can check yourself in on. Any information that you'd like to share, you can put in visitor instructions. Host instructions is very similar, but host instructions are only shared with the host and any other host who is on this particular visit. We have the ability to attach documents. So if you have a map of your facility or something that shows where they should park when they come there, or possibly you have a standard list of directions on how to reach your site from the nearest airport, anything which you have in a document that you'd like to attach to the visit invitation, you can do that here. And very similarly, below that, you'll see you have an option for a site document. And this is where in the back end of the system, when you're configuring your visit sites, you can attach a document there that will go out with every invitation that you send out. Now, clearly there's a lot of fields here. There's a lot of information to type out. If we were doing a lot of invitations or we had very detailed instructions that we wanted to put in here, we would have to remember to type all those things, and that might get a little tedious. Maybe we forget something, maybe we misspell something. That's where visit templates come in. By using a visit template, the security team can create a template of information for the host to choose from, and they can choose that when they're creating the visit to pre-populate some information into the fields. So we'll use our general template, and you'll see we added in a different host. We've also given some instructions to our visitor and some instructions to our host for this particular visit. The next thing we need to do is we need to put in the information about the folk whom we are inviting. We can bulk add visitors or we can add them individually. If we choose to bulk add visitors, we can just click on that icon. We're going to have prepared a CSV file in advance that has all this information. Typically, you would see this when you're inviting a group of people. You've already collected their information ahead of time. You can put it into a CSV file and then you can populate it. I'm going to use my Mercury astronauts for this one. And we'll just populate these guys in. Very quickly, we were able to populate that information. Now, maybe I have somebody else that I need to add to this as well. No problem. I can click in my Add Visitor field, and I can start typing in someone's name. Now, it'll find anything that's already in the system if they have a personnel type that is assigned as being able to be a visitor on my site. Or if the person I'm looking for is not there, I can click on Create New Visitor. Once I do this, I have the ability to put their information in. All right, we'll give Bob a capitalized first name there. We'll do Bob Jones today. And we'll make up a fictitious address so we don't create any junk traffic for folk. We also have the ability to choose additional fields that we would like our visitors to fill in. We can also choose whether or not these fields are mandatory. So you can see the asterisk at the end of everyone's field here. That means all of these fields have been decided to be mandatory. So we'll just go ahead and we'll populate this. I also have the ability to assign templates in the back end. So if I want to, I can pre-populate values in here. That's how demo 1 came to be in that field. So once we're happy with everything we have, we're going to click on save. And what that will do is it will create a personnel record in our Secure 9000, and it will add that visitor to our list. Once we have everything on the list that we're happy with, we go up to the top and we click on the Save and Email button. What this will do is it'll save the visit. You'll see it added to our left-hand side. It's now a visit that we have on our system. It's also going to generate some emails. They're going to send out an email to the visitor, inviting them to come to the site. It's also going to send an email out to our host, so that they will have some information about that visit as well. Once you have a visit in your system, you have the ability to edit them. So if I were to click on one of these over here on the left-hand side, you can see the information comes up about the visit. We have all this information populated. We could change it if we need to. Something I did not mention when we started using templates, templates pre-populate information into the visit, but they do not enforce that information. So if, for instance, I had a template that assigned multiple hosts and I knew that one of those hosts wouldn't be there on that particular date, I can click in my list and choose to remove that particular host. That wraps up how we create a visit within the system. So now we're going to move on in this workflow and we're going to show you the emails that were generated. So the first email I'm going to show you is our host email. This is the confirmation that we have a visit that has been created. I have my instructions to my host listed in my email. I also have a calendar item, any document that was attached to this particular visit item. If we wanted to look at that calendar item to see what it looks like and what other information would be in it, we can see that it includes the name of our other hosts as well as the name of our guest. We also have the information about when that visit is running to. We have our host instructions again, and we also have our attached document. The next email that was created was the one that goes out to the visitor. This is an example of that email. We have largely similar information to what we saw on the host. We see our visitor instructions rather than our host instructions in this case. We still have our calendar item. We still have our document that we attached, but you'll see that we also have a QR code. The QR code is used either at the self-check-in kiosk or it can be used at the reception portal in order to allow the guests to check themselves in a little bit more quickly. So with that, we're going to jump over and we're going to take a look at our self-check-in kiosk. I'm going to drag my iPad up here onto the screen. And everybody can see that. So the Secure 9000 self-check-in kiosk is an iPad-only app. It typically uses wireless communication to talk back to your Secure server. This will allow this to get real-time information directly from the server. It's not storing anything locally. And this will be used in your lobby to allow your guests to come in and check themselves in for their visit. We're now talking about the visitor's role in this workflow. So as a visitor, I've received my email. It's got my QR code in it. I'm going to come up and I'm going to use this particular iPad. If we were so inclined, we do have the ability to have this check-in procedure actually print out a badge for this particular visitor. If we choose to do that, it's going to use Apple AirPrint technology for the iPad to talk to an approved printer for the system that is compatible with this function. As the screen scrolls, you're going to see there's some different languages popping up. We do support multi-language functionality in the kiosk. You get to choose which of the supported languages you would like to show on screen. All of the standard messaging within the kiosk interface is already there and it's in the appropriate language as it usually is. You can also customize any message that appears on this screen. The messages that you customize, you'll need to type them in the language that you want them to appear and also in the manner in which you want them to appear. We're not going to do translation of custom messages. Now that we have that little bit of housekeeping taken care of, let's go ahead and get ourselves checked in as a visitor. So we walk up to our iPad and we can click on the screen to get things started. First thing we need to do is choose what language we want to work with. I only speak English, so we're going to go with that one. Now we have the option of logging ourselves in or checking ourselves into this kiosk using either the QR code that we were supplied in our email, or we can use our email address or our name. Some of these features are selectable if you want to allow one or the other. So we could talk about that if we have a more thorough meeting where we go into the configuration. For this particular example, I'm going to use the QR code. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to turn on my system camera. I'm going to take my smartphone and I'm going to show it the QR code from the email. This is now going to jump ahead and it's going to show me whatever document I have chosen as an NDA style document to attach to this particular invitation. It's actually attached at the site level. So when you configure your site, you tell it what you're going to have. Your document is listed. This particular one is showing a questionnaire about COVID-19 because that's been a big topic, obviously, in everyone's lives for the past couple of years. You can see that our continue button is not available to us right now. It is grayed out until we click the checkbox that says that we agree with the conditions of the document. Once we click on that box, we click on continue, it'll allow us to move ahead in this process. This particular individual has been here before, so we don't have anything further to do with them. It's going to show me that we've found the visit, scheduled visit, when that starts, when it ends. It also shows the picture of my host. So this is really to take care of that awkward moment that we've all experienced where we're visiting someone at a site, we're walking into the lobby, and we have no idea what our host looks like who's going to come see us. So we show the picture from the portrait that's on file in the Secure 9000 system to give you an idea who it is you're here to see. And then once you're done, you just go ahead and click finish. Now, the particular example that I'm using when I'm demonstrating this check-in function is the example of a contractor who's coming in on a recurring basis, but it's the same process for any other visitor as well. The interesting thing and why we use the contractor as a demonstration is because we're going to use the same code on a repeated basis. So I'm going to click on this screen again. I'm going to choose English, and I'm going to go ahead and try and use my QR code a second time. It's the same QR code. So I'm going to show it to my camera, and it's going to find it, and it's going to stop, and it's going to tell me that I'm already checked in for a visit. Now I have the option, I can choose to allow this particular contractor to check out using the kiosk if I wish to, or they can just click finish and they'll stay checked in. So there's really not the possibility that you're going to have someone who would use the same QR code multiple times to check into the same visit unless it's a recurring structure like we're demonstrating in the contractor function. So we can go ahead and just click finish for this. We're not going to check that particular contractor out. Another function that we have with our self-check-in kiosk is we have the ability, if we choose to allow someone to check in even if they are not pre-registered. We'll show you how that works. So we'll click on our screen again, and we'll choose English. And this time, instead of using a QR code, we're going to say we're going to use our name or our email address. So we'll just go ahead and click that field. I'm going to type in an email address. We're just going to jump up here, and we'll be... we'll spell that name correctly there. We'll be Tom today. Again, we'll choose our fictitious email address. And we'll go ahead and check in. And the system will say, sorry, we can't find a registered visit for you today. Would you like to be registered as a visitor? And now I can choose, yes, I'd like to be registered. The next thing I need to do as a visitor is I need to specify who it is that I'm here to see. So I can click in this field and I can begin typing in a name. As soon as you put a couple of characters in there, the system is going to search through the available hosts for this particular site, and it's going to show you who they are, and you can choose from that list. Now, we did have some folks early on who were adopters of this program and said, we really like the way this works, but we're a little bit concerned that you could just walk up to a kiosk and you can start typing in someone's name and find out who works here. So we've added in the option in later versions where we can limit this functionality. We can choose not to allow it at all, for one thing, but we also have the ability to limit it so that you have to use the exact email address of the host that you're here to see in order to go ahead and register yourself for a visit. So just keep in mind that those are options for you. I'm going to go ahead and click on Cave for today. Cave's allowed to have a visitor at the software house site, so we're all good to go there. We're going to click on Continue. It's going to ask me for the rest of the information that I've specified that I want to collect about my visitors. So we'll go ahead in here and we will say that we are Tom. And we'll click Continue. Now the next screen is going to go into those other fields that you've decided that you want to collect information about your visitors for. So whatever other fields that you've chosen from the personnel record that you'd like to collect information on, they'll appear here. You can choose again whether or not they're mandatory or optional. I'm going to click Continue. We're going to see the same NDA agreement we saw before. It works in the same manner. We'll again select that we accept the document. We'll click Continue. And now the next thing we see is that we don't have a portrait on file for this particular visitor. So we have the option, if we wish to do so, of collecting that portrait directly at the kiosk. So now I can just control this entirely myself. I can look at the kiosk, I can smile, and I can take my own picture. If I don't like it, I can click Reset. If I like it, I can just click Continue and move on. All right, now we're in, we're scheduled for a visit. Thank you, you've been successfully checked in. Please wait for your host to arrive. All right, so with that, we'll take the kiosk down off the screen and we'll show you the next logical step in this procedure. All right, so we've gone in as a host, we've invited a visitor, we've been notified by email that we were inviting someone to come to the site. We sent an email to our visitor so that they would be able to check in easily and have the instructions and information that they need to come and be a visitor at our site. The visitors come in and they've been able to check in themselves at the self-check-in kiosk, all pretty clean. We've been able to move through that process, no problem. The next thing that happens in the cycle is once your visitor has checked in, we're going to send a notification to our host and let them know that our visitor has checked in. So we're going to send an information out. We're going to say, Dear Jason Troster, your visitor has arrived and checked in. This is the visit name that's showing right here. So checked in for visit, we're showing our visit name. This is the one that was automatically created by the system because I didn't specify one. And then we have our host instructions listed as we saw before. We're also going to include the photo that we took at the kiosk of this particular contractor, in this case, our visitor, and we're going to send that over to the host. And the reason we're going to do that is to take care of that other side of the awkward moment in the lobby where the host doesn't know what their visitor looks like. So we've captured that information and we've shared it with the people that it's related to. The next thing we can do with the visitor management system, since we've been through how the visitor can check themselves in at a kiosk, is the next would be, well, how would our receptionists work with this system in order to check folk in? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to go back to our Secure Web Portal. This time we're going to log back in again. We're still going to be Caroline in this case because she has the access to be able to do it. But this time we're going to use our reception portal. Jumping into our reception portal, once again, we have a site list that we can choose from. So if we wanted to separate the New York and the Chicago offices, we can do that. We'll choose what site it is we're going to go into. We can control whether or not our security staff is able to go into those particular sites. We created the Secure Web Portal, Receptionist Portal, specifically to make things a little bit easier in the instance where our receptionists are not necessarily operators of Secure 9000. Possibly we have a small office and we don't actually have any security staff on site, but we have someone who handles anybody who comes through the front door and they need to be able to process visitors. Possibly we have an admin who's in charge of everyone who comes into the C-suite in our building and they want to be able to process their own visitors. Perfectly fine. Anyone can use this interface. It is not exclusive. So if you find that you like this interface, you can have your security team who's already using the normal Secure 9000 clients use this interface as well. There's a couple of reasons you might do that. It is a nice clean interface. This did not really require much in the way of programming. It pretty much comes this way out of the box, as it were. So all this information is going to be on your screen. Once you're in the screen, we have a lot of things that are going on here, but we have very concise information about our visitors. If we look on our left-hand side of the screen, we have our categories. We can see the total number of visitors, who's expected, who's checked in already, who's checked out, who's late to check in. And if we're checking our visitors out, we know whether or not they've overstayed their visit. If I wanted to filter this information down, maybe I'm only interested in the folk who are not on site yet. Well, in that case, I could choose the expected folk and the ones who are late, and we'll be able to see just that list. We can narrow things down a little bit that way. If we want to go back to the full list again, that's no problem. We can just click on the total visitors button at the top. We get everyone back again. If I'm sitting at the desk and I'm receiving folk who are coming in and somebody comes up to me, says, "Hi, I'm Scott, I'm here for my visit," I can find him very quickly. I can click in this filter field at the top of the visitor name, and I can just type in his name. As I start typing in characters, it's going to limit it down based on those that match. We found Scott very quickly, obviously. Once we've found our visitor, there's a few things that we can do with him. We can check him in, we can check him out. We can assign him temporary credentials. We can return those credentials. We can edit the visit if we need to. We can view the activity, which is going to show us the last time that Scott was here for a visit. We also have the ability to print that label that we mentioned before when we were talking about the kiosk. When we talk about these labels that we're printing, our visitor badge, we're really talking about that "Hello, my name is" sticker that we're all familiar with getting when we go and we visit places. You'll also note there's an assist button here. The assist button will queue up an event within the main Secure 9000 system. That's programmable. You guys can choose how you want that to operate. So you'll want to discuss that with your integrator and decide what events you want to queue and what actions you want to have happen when someone clicks the assist button from within this interface. If I wanted to check Scott in, I can go ahead and click on check in. It's going to bring up his name. In this case, we've already checked him in once before, so we have a photo on file. If the person standing in front of me is identifiably Scott, but maybe his image isn't up to date, maybe he just wants a new one, we can change that. We can click on change photo. If we were doing this for the first time with this person, you would not see a portrait image here, and we would just click on change photo to set the original one. Once you click on it, it's going to open the webcam that's attached to this particular workstation. When it opens the webcam, you'll see you have a take a picture button, and then you have a counter directly underneath of it. So you can have your guest look at the camera and say, "Well, look at the camera and smile, and I'll count down for you." You can click on the button, 3, 2, 1, and we capture a new photo. No problem at all. We have the ability to assign temporary credentials. If you're not familiar with what temporary credentials are in the Secure 9000 system, they are credentials that are already in the Secure 9000 system, but are not yet associated with any records. And there's a couple of different things that we can do with them. But in this case, let's say that I'm at the desk. I have a stack of badges here that are temporary credentials that are not currently assigned to anybody. I have the first one on my list might be 14 something. So we'll just click in this field and we'll start typing in, I've got 1425 here and available. I've got the card here in my hand. We're good to go. I can click on that particular credential number and assign it to Scott for the duration of his visit. Once I've got everything set for him, I click check in visitor, and we're all set. We're ready to go. Now that we need to get our list back to our full list so we can see everyone who's coming in, we'll just go ahead and click this little X to clear the filter field, and we'll see everyone again. One of the records that may come to your attention is Wheatley Williams here, who is on our watch list. We do support a watch list within the Secure 9000 system. It is an internally managed watch list, so we're not referencing external data sources for this information. This would be information that you put into your own 9000 system for folk who you want to put onto a watch list. In terms of how it works, the watch list is keyed to events that are in the 9000 system. So if I were, as a host, to go in and invite someone who's on the watch list, I'll be able to find their name in the list. There's nothing that will look different about that name. I'll be able to select it. We're not going to notify our host that they've chosen someone for the watch list. What we're going to do is we're going to notify security that a host has chosen someone from the watch list, and then security has the option to handle that situation as they see fit. Something else we can do from this interface is if I have a walk-up person who's not pre-registered for a visit, they come up, they say, "Hi, I'm here. I'd like to see Caroline." That's fine, no problem at all. I can use the New Visit button, and you'll see I have exactly the same screens that we saw before as our host. I can populate them in the same manner. At the top of the screen, I have the choice of sending and emailing that content when we're done, or I can just choose to save it, and it'll just populate that visit directly into the system. We don't need to necessarily generate emails in this case because the person's standing right in front of me already. If I want to go back to my list, I click on visitor list, I can jump back. I'm not going to save that particular visit. That's why we see the option. If my visitor has walked up and they have a QR code on their phone and they'd like to use that, I have a QR button here that will work with our webcam to capture that information. Some other things that I can do in this interface that are interesting, I have these three little lines over here and this button. If you're familiar with that from other spots of the Secure 9000 interface, you know that means there's more things that I can do. I can click on this and I can see I have a couple of things that I can work with. I can change which columns are on my screen. I also have the ability to export this data. So if I needed to give a list to somebody else who's in my lobby or is interested in what visitors we have coming today, I can do that. I can choose to export all my data as a PDF, and it'll create a PDF document that has all my visitor information on it. We also have the ability to limit that. So maybe if I don't want all of that information to be on the screen, maybe I just want to see, for instance, the folk who are late to check in, and we want to do that as a specific list. I can do that by choosing the visible data, and that'll limit that information that we're going to have. Now that we have it in a PDF file, we have the ability to now work with that as we see fit. If we've got the ability to print or the ability to save an email at this particular workstation, we can do that to distribute this information to other people. One thing we haven't really talked about in terms of checking our visitors in and out is related to that contractor option that we used earlier. And we're just going to talk about this particular function because there's not a good way to show it on the screen. Let's say we do have a contractor who's coming in on a regular basis. I think a lot of you on the phone probably can relate to that situation. You're the sponsor, you have a contractor, but you don't really know when they come to the site. You know, maybe they call you and tell you they're there, maybe they don't. You don't really know. You could actually handle those contractors as visitors. By doing that, when your contractor comes in and checks in, they will then be assigned any clearances that are related to their visit. So they won't be able to use the card, even if they take it with them, until they're checked in for the visit. And you will get the email to notify you that your contractor is on site. In addition to that, you can also have them check in just by hitting a reader that's designated as a check-in reader. So you can designate that functionality on a card reader if you choose to do so. Someone comes in, they scan their card, they automatically get checked in for their visit because they've scanned their card. You can do the same thing to check someone out of visit. So there's a couple of different ways that we can check a person out of a visit. We can have them come back to the desk. We can find their record. Maybe we're going to take Scott here, and he's all done. He'd like to check out. Well, we can check him out and return his temporary credentials in one shot. No problem. He's checked out. Our data repopulates. Now we have an updated color on the box beside his name representing what his current state is. No problem at all. We can designate a checkout reader. So for our contractor, he's on his way out. He can just scan his card across that card reader that's on the exit door, and it's just going to automatically check him out of his visit. No problem. We can have them go back to the kiosk and check themselves out. We saw that demonstrated when we tried to use the QR code more than once. That's a way we can check out our visitors. Another way we can do it is we can set up an event within our system that automatically checks everyone out. So maybe we trust our visitors to come back to the desk most of the time, but we know that some of them just won't make it. So as a cleanup function, at the end of my business day, maybe an hour after, just to make sure we pick up any stragglers, we're going to go ahead and run an event that will automatically check everyone out of their visit. That's another possibility that you have available to you. So that pretty much wraps up our content that we're going to cover in this particular demonstration today. We've gone over a general overview of the host, visitor, and receptionist experience in the Secure 9000 visitor management option. There are more features and there's configuration that's related to the content when we do a full demonstration, but because of the time constraints, we cut it down to just this particular part of the interface. If you're interested in more information about this product, I encourage you to contact your integrator or your software house sales rep and set up a more formal demonstration that's a little bit more catered to your situation. All right, Ashley, I think at that point we can take questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a bunch in here, so let's get started. So one of the first ones that came in is, can multiple docs be included for the visitor, such as like an NDA and a COVID form?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I also wanted to note that on the actual kiosk, we do have user-defined fields where some sites are using those fields to populate questions at check-in that the visitor can actually answer on the kiosk.
That is also true. We didn't demonstrate it today.
Okay. All right. The next one is, are there any plans for anything other than an iPad, which were not today, but there was a second part to that question. If sticking with the iPad, is there any way to hardwire an Ethernet connection for a site that doesn't want to allow wireless connection to network resources?
So the comment I'll make about that is that our iPad software that we're running doesn't necessarily dictate the need for a wireless communication. If you were to find a way to wire that directly, if you were to use a third-party accessory to create a LAN connection to that device, it would work fine. However, I will point out that since we are using Apple AirPrint to print the badges at the kiosk, that functionality may not work for you.
We are working on having an AirPrint functional printer as well that also can be used like a USB plug-in at the receptionist desk. So some sites that don't want to use the kiosk can just print, from the desk and not have to use that AirPrint functionality. Okay, the next one is there a way to identify separate check-in locations at the same site? For example, 2 different reception desks.
Absolutely. The reception desk function is actually driven by the configuration of what's called a check-in site in the Secure 9000 platform. So when we talk about the configuration, we talk about check-in sites, and then we relate visit sites to our check-in sites. So if, for instance, we're in a metropolitan area and we have 2 entrances on either side of the same building, maybe one of those entrances has access to certain offices and the other one does not. We could create different check-in sites which have access to those related visit sites.
Okay. If we need to capture a signature for an NDA, how is that done?
At this time, we are not capturing signatures for NDAs. In fact, a little bit of detail on how we handle the NDA. The NDA is displayed on screen, and beginning in Secure version 2.9, we started adding a journal entry that says that the individual accepted the NDA. That's the extent of the information that we're capturing related to it. I think it works for some customers. It might not work for others. It's important to know how it operates.
Okay, great. If visitors count as personnel records, do they purge automatically, periodically, or manually?
At this time, they do not purge automatically. You will need to set up a means of managing that information.
Yeah, I've heard from other sites that they'll set up an event that occurs nightly that will just kind of close those out, at the end of the workday.
Sure. It becomes very installation specific at that point, because if you are using a recurring visit, there may be some nuance there that you have to figure out how you're going to work with as far as how that event is programmed. The other thing that I'll point out to you is when we talk about licensing for Secure 9000 and personnel records, do remember that we're talking about enabled personnel records. So if you disable the personnel record, it will no longer count toward your license.
Okay. All right. Can you print a QR code on a visitor badge that can be used as an access card, provided you have barcode readers on the turnstiles?
That's a situation that gets very specific to the installation. So in that case, I prefer that you have a discussion directly with your integrator and your software house rep, and we can show you what that functionality looks like in the system. I'm not going to say that it does not work. It does. I just think it needs a little bit more explanation.
Yeah, I just want to note high level that the QR code that gets emailed to the visitor is not a credential. It's really just housing the visitor, like visitor details, like the date and time and all of that. But we do have in CCID the ability now to add a QR code or barcode to badges, which could be temporary badges as well.
Yep, it works very much the same way that our barcode function has always worked in the badging feature. Now we added an additional barcode option, which is the QR code, and that came in version 2.9. The QR code that's emailed out to the visitors, I will also point out, is specific to that visitor. So you can't send the visitor, if I have multiple visitors on the same visit, they're not going to get the same QR code. It's identifying that individual.
Okay. Is the ability to be a host assigned via a clearance within Secure?
It's not actually assigned via clearance. It's done from within the actual personnel record. I'll actually, hang on a moment, and I'll bring up my admin console. We'll show this for a second, and we'll show you a personnel record. So in this case, we used Caroline as our example. We'll just double click on her record. This is going to be typical of your installation. If we go down to the web and mobile tab, this is where you'll see you'll have your email address that you use to log in to the portal. You'll also have your Windows Principal account that's related to that email address. And these 4 checkboxes right here are what dictate whether or not you're allowed to have access to that function. Now, additionally, you also have the ability to configure whether or not Caroline has access to a specific visit site or a specific check-in site if she's a receptionist. All of that's configurable in the system, and we can show that to you in a more complete demo.
Okay. Is there a way for the host to get a text message when a visitor checks in other than just an email?
The system currently does not support SMS text messaging. I know that Ashley's team is considering that for a future release at some point, but right now there's no way to do it directly. There is a workaround way that you could do it where you would create a email address which is related to a text message and send it in that fashion. So it is possible. It's not directly supported by the system.
Okay. Another good one here. Can we have questions, for example, health or vaccination screening, that have to be answered before they can be checked in? So we might have covered that earlier, but yeah, there are UDF fields available that you can configure to be some sort of health screening or, OSHA certification or whatever might be needed to be able to be on site. Is there a way to auto-populate fields for frequent or returning visitors?
So if you have a visitor who's coming in again, anything that they've already populated is still going to be there because we're not going to necessarily be purging these visitors out. So if I were to now want to invite our example of Bob back to the site, I can jump back in here. I can go to visitor management. If I create a new visit, I can jump into this add visitor field here, and what was it, Tom we invited today. So we can type in his name. You can see he's already in the system. All I have to do is choose him.
Is there any way, there was a second part of that question that came in as a separate line item. So he said, when a reception is checking them in and not pre-registered.
The receptionist will have exactly the same information available to them. Remember, the screens are going to be pretty much the same. So if I am in my receptionist role and Tom walks up to me and he's not pre-registered today, I can click on New Visit. I go to the same Add Visitor field. I type in Tom and his name pops up because he's already in my system. And really the advantage of having our visitors in our personnel record is because anything that we do with a normal personnel record on a normal basis, we can now do with our visitors. We have journal entries on their information. We have audit records on their information. We can run reports on what doors they've used and where they've been. We can run reports on who has who has invited them to come to the site. All that information that we're used to having in our audit log in our journal related to our personnel also now applies to our visitors.
Okay. We need to check for citizenship at check-in. Is there a way to ask that question and force it to fire off an email to export compliance?
So yes, we can ask the question. We covered that in the topic of asking questions that were related to COVID, so that's not a problem at all. When we get to the creating an email to export compliance, that's an interesting one. I would say there's probably a couple of different ways that we could handle that situation, and I'd recommend that we take that as a one-off conversation with the particular customer.
Okay. Can interfaces flow into the visitor management system, such as HL7 in particular? So no, at this time, I don't think we have any. I think HL7 is in the healthcare field vertical. So I don't think we have that unless there's an external integration done.
Yeah, it's kind of a perfect time to mention the fact that we do have a very robust integration functionality with Secure 9000. So when we talk about referencing data from other systems, there are ways to do it. There's not a specific integration related to our visitor management offering, as it were, but if you've got something that you're interested in, again, that might be one for a one-off conversation.
Okay. Can IDs be verified? So scan driver's licenses or passports. So absolutely, we have integration with Accurant with their Assure ID SDK starting in 290. Previous to that, we had an AccuFill SDK that followed. This is for data capture, not data verification. But you know, it's an SDK. They repopulate the different licenses and passport designs as they change. And this is a CCID integration that can be used in tandem with visitor management. And we have several scanners that are available. We have some Snapshell R2, R3 models. We had a legacy Snapshell passport model that is end of life now, but several customers are still using that. And then we have 2 new Gemalto scanners as well that are both passport and license options.
The only thing I would add to that is that the ID scanning functionality is done through the normal Secure 9000 thick client. So you wouldn't be using it in these interfaces necessarily, but we do have it available for use with visitor management.
Yeah, typically be done at the receptionist desk. It's not for the kiosk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. How are clearances for visitors managed?
Clearances for visitors are managed through the templates. So when we choose these templates that we were showing earlier, remember I said that these are created by our security staff in advance. And the function is that when you create a template, you can assign a clearance to that template, which works out great because what will happen is when the visitor comes in and they check in for their visit and you give them whatever temporary credential it is that they're going to use as they're there, the credential is assigned to the visitor, but the clearance is only assigned at the time that the visitor checks in. So it won't be present in their personnel record until they are checked in. And likewise, as soon as they are checked out, the clearance is removed from their record. So the great thing about that is even if someone walks away with your visitor card, you don't have to worry about that continuing to be active because as soon as you check them out of their visit, it's now a useless card. It's not going to have any function.
Okay, here's a good one. So are there different styles of visitor badges depending on where they are going or who they are? So I definitely think different site setups can design their own. But then they had a follow-up saying, I want to know if there's different badges available for, say, visitors versus students. Can you do 2 different ones on the same site?
So what you're going to be doing is you're going to define by visit site which visitor label is going to be used for that site. So what you would do in that instance is you would create 2 visit sites, and one of those would be for your corporate visitors and the other one would be for student visitors.
Okay. Can you schedule when people can be hosts for both certain times of day, when they can have visitors, and the ability to exclude days when they cannot have visitors?
That's an interesting question. Ashley, I don't believe we support that. I think that's the first time I've ever heard that question.
So, we have, a pretty robust, roadmap for both of this and the access management workflow functionality. And there has been definitely discussions about a crossover between having that access management workflow available for the visitor management side. So that's probably one that would be taken up, if we get that conversion underway. Good question, though. Let's see. Is there a way a visitor who forgets to check out to be auto checked out at a certain time so they don't show up in a mustering report?
Yes, so you can auto check people out with an event, as we mentioned previously. But if you're talking more on an individualized basis, it's probably something you're going to have your reception staff kind of keep an eye on. So when they see somebody has overstayed their visit, they would look into confirming whether or not that person is still on site.
Okay. Can the UDFs be enforced so that, for example, if somebody's not vaccinated and the site requires that, they cannot be checked in? So I think in this case, depending on how the question's answered, that would have to be part of the protocol of obviously that answer would be captured, and then either the host or receptionist would have to have the protocol followed of, this, visit can't progress because we need a vaccination or whatever the standard policy is for that site. But the answer will be captured. Okay, I know we're running low on time, but I still have a few more here if we can tackle them. Does the system support a color badge sticker printer? So yes. We do have several printers and color options as well. Does this ever link or match with staff in the Secure database? So I guess I'm taking that to mean a employee from a different site visiting a different location. So
sure. So within your personnel types on your Secure 9000 system, there will be a checkbox that says whether or not folk who are in that personnel type are allowed to be visitors. If that checkbox is populated, then that person can be a visitor.
So somebody else asked, they have to provide a state visitor form quarterly. So how do they integrate that form? So that would be one of the attachments as part of the visitor template, right?
Without knowing anything about the form, it's difficult to answer that question. So that might be a best one-off. Have a follow-up conversation with your integrator and your sales rep.
Okay. Okay, let's just take one more here. And is there a scheduler available so the guest receives the email 3 days prior to the visit rather than when the visit is scheduled a month in advance?
I don't believe we have that functionality right now. I think that probably would come possibly in the calendar item, maybe. We're not doing that. I don't know of a way to support that off the top of my head. I don't think we support it in our system.
I think based on your email provider, though, like you'll get alerts, whether it's Outlook or Gmail, there'll be at least 24 hours in advance. I'm not sure about 3 days, but it could be a setting that you might be able to assign to your events that are saved.
Yeah, I think the person who receives the calendar item, they'll be able to manage that directly. But again, I don't think it's something that we're necessarily going to be pushing out.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We had a great crowd here. Jason, thank you again for this presentation. If you have any follow-up questions, Jason, if you could just put up your background that has the contact details.
Sure thing.
These are some of the area sales managers and also Jason's information as well, or you can email this account, Carol Vidaro's account, and we will get an answer to you or get you to the right person. Again, next month's presentation is going to follow the second side of the portal, going over the access management workflow. So thanks again for joining and hope to see you next month. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.